obviously being in this line of work, I mean, I would want my kids to be involved in this, so they, the first time they experience or at least have some sort of training in what to do isn't like in a real life scenario.
Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. I'm your host, Clayton O'Brien, and I'm the fire chief for the city of Oregon.
All right, welcome to the Triple P Podcast. Today we're staying close to home with our next guest who have joined us in the studio. From the Findlay Fire Department, we have Battalion Chief Matt Cooper, and from the Findlay Police Department, we're joined by Lieutenant Andrew Welch. We're talking today about school safety, specifically for active shooter or hostile event response, and how communities can take a collaborative approach to planning, training, and response. We'll also talk about the steps that the Findlay City School District has taken to improve student safety and how other school districts around the state can do the same and take the same approach. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you for being on the Triple P Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Were you trying to tell me that I need to read exactly what we have on the introductions every time? Because you did a good job at that.
Not at all. This is my first intro, so I practiced that last night. Yeah.
Great job.
All right, so let's talk about background a little bit. You guys kind of both collaborated on the steps that Findlay City Schools have taken to improve student safety. Lieutenant Welch, tell us about your background and kind of focus on like that active shooter stuff and the training that you've done.
Yeah, so I'm 20 years into the career. I've been part of the tactical response team, which is the equivalent of our SWAT team, since 2013. So I've got however many years that is doing that. I think it's about 12. During that time, I've also become an instructor with our department for Raider, which is a solo officer response to active shooter and violent threats within schools. So that's something that I've prided myself on for about the last 10 years. And I'm also, at one point, I was ALICE certified, which is kind of the student and teacher approach to an active shooter within a school. And now we've kind of made the transition from ALICE to Run, Hide, Fight, which is kind of the FEMA basics on how to respond to an active shooter if you're within a location where one occurs. So lots of years of tactics, lots of different things with SWAT and also with the solo officer response.
Very cool. And Chief Cooper, you've had a pretty extensive career in the fire service. You've had 20 plus years on Findlay Fire Department, have some years before that, risen through the ranks, but tell us about your unique role with the school district.
Yeah, so I joined the Findlay School Board in 2017, and this is my third year being the school board president. Did it because it's obviously the community that I live in. I have a couple kids that go to school in Findlay City School District, and obviously that's where I graduated from was Findlay. And all the way from kindergarten through graduation, I attended Findlay City Schools. So it holds a special place in my heart. I wanted to give back to the school system. It's a volunteer position, and just wanted to make it better.
So talking about Findlay specifically, when we were in about, I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2012, 2014. Was really the first that I recall, the first collaborative approach to active shooter response, planning and response for the city of Findlay. And I didn't bring it with me, but we had what we all call, as responders, we all called the FOG, right? So that was the field operating guide for active shooter incidents. Do you remember the background on that? That was a group of first responders and the school district that got together and put that together.
Yeah, I think from what I remember about it, and I should have brought it so we could refer to it, but I believe it was a group that got together and talked about some things, and I don't know how many people were involved from the school district, and that was one of the problems that I believe that Lieutenant Welch and I identified when we were looking at this to change our approach, not only the response, but identification, notification, all that stuff was related to what we had with the FOG. The field operating guide that was being used, and everybody knows this in any school district, the buildings change so often. Staff changes a lot, moving from school district to school district. And we just really, once you print it, it's pretty much outdated. So we were looking for another approach to how we can communicate those things to, responding personnel and to the community itself, because a response like this, we identified, and as everybody knows, I mean, it's pretty much common sense. It's not just a one entity response. It's a community. It's an entire community. And one of the things that hit home for me when we started talking about this was watching other school districts experience this, which is probably the worst experience that anybody in any community would experience. But every single time they kept saying, we never thought it would happen here. And we hear that a lot, just even when you're talking about increasing safety and security with other school districts that we've had conversations with, you hear them talk about, well, it's probably not going to happen here. Well, yeah, you may be right, but if it does and you didn't do enough, you're the one responsible for that. So another thing that we talk about too with school districts, and I hear it even cities, township, municipalities, even when we're talking about our own personal jobs, is they, everybody likes to talk about safety. It's a great talking point. We support police and fire. We support, student safety, whether it's a school board approach or whatever. And they always say, well, we prioritize safety. I don't care what school district you look at. If you look at their strategic plan and you look at what they say, they always prioritize safety. And I always tell people, you can't say you prioritize it if you always wait for a grant. If you're going to prioritize it and say that it's a priority to you and to your community, then you need to invest in that. So we took that approach in Findlay, and Columbine happened a year after I graduated high school, and I always talk about that because I think that changed a lot of things for response, and then it just keeps happening over and over. And you always see from politicians thoughts and prayers with no real solutions. And thankfully I have the partnership with Lieutenant Welch, where we started to identify things and took a deep dive into Findlay and started to make improvements to what we needed to do. Some were very cost effective as far as, minimal cost, but big impact. And then some of them were a little bit bigger investment to the district, but overall it was the right thing to do. It was not a thoughts and prayers approach. It was, we identified this problem. We're going to figure out where our gaps are here in Findlay, and we're going to fix them. And my background with the fire department, obviously I'm on the SWAT team with these guys. So that's why I have, such a good relationship with Lieutenant Welch as my counterpart on that team. And we just started talking through it. So that's really, where all this stuff started. And, I would say the last straw for me was probably between my first year on the Board of Education was Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and having kids in the building. I realized that they're not protected like people think they're protected. Yeah. And then Uvalde happened, and, it kept going. And I just couldn't take it anymore. We had to do something.
So you had a unique approach because you being on the school board, so you had the ability to kind of have an impact of like actually investing into it, where a lot of communities don't necessarily have that. Did you take it from being in the president's seat, or even on just in general on the board, and try to approach it that way, or were you waiting it for? Because usually it's like kind of the superintendent brings it to the board, or how'd you guys facilitate that conversation, or did it maybe come from the police department with SROs, or how did that all happen?
So, after Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, we did start to look at the safety aspect. Like I said, that was my first year on the Board of Education, and I really didn't have any influence then, trying to learn the ins and outs of, public school finance, which, if you want to have a 3.5 hour podcast about that, we can talk about it because it's very confusing. But, we all know leadership is influence. And so we had to, I had to, start to gain the trust of other board members, and then, start to have that conversation later, which it did. I mean, it took place. I didn't have to wait till I was the president of the school board. Now, ultimately, that's when we made the changes. I had a great relationship with the superintendent at the time, had a, great relationship with the other board members that understood, what we were trying to accomplish. And that's when usually the superintendent does bring things to the board, to approve or not to approve. And usually those things revolve more around like hiring and policy. But a board meeting is exactly that. It's a board agenda. It's a board meeting. So the school board has the ability to put anything they want on that agenda and to discuss it, talk about it, approve it or not approve it. And that's usually within the superintendent or the board president or even the treasurer's role and responsibilities. So when the time came, I put it on the agenda and said, we're going to have this discussion.
From a police department perspective, we actually started having these discussions prior to Matt being in his position, and we ran into some issues as to where do we fit in this at the table. So once Matt, obviously he and I have that working relationship within our other job, and it was how do we get the right people around the table? And I think that was the biggest breakthrough we had early on. Was we had a lot of ideas that we wanted to do from the police department side of things, but they were never able to actually come to light and actually be implemented because it could never get past a certain area. And we were having a hard time. Where were we failing? Where were we having that's a fork in the road? So when Matt was able to get that and we were able to get at the table and we literally brought the people into a room, sat down around a table and had our discussions, that's when it really started to open things up for us because we were already looking for ways to try to improve our response, because we'd been pretty heavily invested in the solo officer response at that point for several years. And you get to a point in training where you can train and train and train, but you're still experiencing a 4, 5, 6 minute gap in response just because of the nature of the way things go. And we were trying to figure out how do we make that as small time gap as possible. So when, Matt got the opportunity to actually kind of influence who was going to be in the meetings and have those talking points, I think that's when things really started to turn in our favor and gave us the opportunity to really make some effective change.
Now, did you do it as a county or did you do it as just like Findlay, the city of Findlay?
So we did have discussions with the other county schools. Now, when we talk about the history and what Chief Eberly said with the fog, that was countywide. And,
because I guess that's what I was thinking about. Because I feel like I've seen that book before, right? Does it say Hancock County on the front of it?
It does.
Well, it's done by Impact America at the time or whatever. Because we did the same thing in Henry County. So, but to your point, it's like as soon as it's printed, it's like, oh shoot, now we need a sticker to go over top of this because this has already changed. So that was that where the history started, of at least the conversations began there.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point about the stickers and making changes because, and we can talk about that a little bit later because we had, a couple swatting events in Hancock County where we realized that some of the schools maybe weren't up to speed or the communication wasn't there. I mean, you think about any line of duty death or, things that go wrong. Typically the number one thing is communication in some way, shape or form broke down. So we were trying to really bridge that gap. And you guys know as fire chiefs of, Oregon and then also in Findlay or even with the police department, schools are required to submit, safety plans for signature, but how is that really communicated to the rank and file that are going to respond to those incidents? And, basically they get uploaded to a database and nobody sees them ever again. And usually that takes place with like a director of operations within a school district, but then you have your staff and your administrators that, maybe look at that plan once and then it's gone. And then they have no idea, when chaos happens, which is really what that's our we're basically responding to chaos. And so trying to organize that and effectively respond to that to save as many lives as possible was our main objective. And to be able to communicate that with everybody so they know what role and responsibility they have was really, a big part of our plan. And to speak of like the stickers in the county schools, we sat down and talked to other school districts and told them what we were doing and why we were doing it and how we were doing it. And really it always comes down to administrations or boards of education saying, well, that's great and that's a great plan and we really appreciate the input, but we have to invest in that. And so I always go back to, then don't say safety is a priority for your students or staff. If you're unwilling to do it, then just say you're unwilling to do it and take, roll the dice and take the chance. That's fine. I mean, a lot of places do that, and I don't fault them for that, because it's a very big investment at the end of the day, and it's a huge undertaking. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. Communicating, especially in a district like Findlay, where it's 864 staff members, is who we trained. We shut down school for a day to do it. So, and I'm sure we're going to touch on that, but we tried to communicate that. But right now, it's just a Findlay thing. Now, some other school districts are following suit. They're implementing pieces of the plan, and I think in hope to get fully implemented like Findlay is, because as I sit here today, with one of my daughters has graduated. We got one more that's, she's going to be a sophomore next year, and I'll touch on the oldest one a little bit later, but I'm very confident in the fire, police, hospital, rally point, street department response to any school building in the city of Findlay, to the point where I will tell you, and even one of the FBI guys that we worked with will tell you, that it's the most protected school district in the country.
It's awesome where we're at, but really that Impact America booklet, that field operating guide that we had, it kind of set the table for where we're at now. It really was, I think, the foundation that we build off of, and the benefit of it is it got all of us to the table, even at least from a limited countywide standpoint. All of us knew that we had to work together to facilitate a decent response. So even though there were, gaps that we identified in that existing, that existing plan, at least all that was way ahead of where we would have been if we didn't have that.
Which I thought I do think is a good point, because if you didn't start there somewhere, well, one, you can't identify what gaps you do have, and so it gets everybody at the table. But then, but number two is police and fire working together. I know that was a big thing for us when we did that plan, was just that your guys' command at the police department is a lot different than how the fire department command works, and then now you're joining also city services. When you've got the barricades and those people getting called in, and then you have air ambulances and whatever else. Fire's pretty used to a lot of that different running a scene like that, but then joining the people from the school, and then joining the people from the police department in this unified command approach was always a little bit different. But I think that I want to jump over to the police department real quick. In that guide, was your guys' plan just to after you guys, did you guys have SROs at the schools at this time or no?
No, we actually still don't have SROs.
Okay.
We have a crime prevention officer that goes between the schools. We have 13?
Yeah, 13 buildings.
Schools
wow.
in Findlay.
Okay.
So we have an SRO that goes between them. Now, the high school does have armed security. A lot of those guys are retired law enforcement from sheriff's office or our jurisdiction, so they've got some training in some of the response things. But as far as SROs, we still do not have.
Okay. No. All right. Which is new. That's just different for us. Every one of our schools has an SRO that they, I think they do a 5-year rotation, and then they rotate through. So, it's unique it's nice to hear how different places are doing it, because I was curious about how many buildings you guys had to cover in Findlay. So when we talk about a county somewhere in rural Henry County, you're talking about 13 buildings across not even that, probably across the entire county, compared to just in one city of Findlay schools. 13 buildings is a heck of a lot to protect.
Yeah, I think you got to give a lot of credit to those guys that came together back in 2012 or 2014, because it was a very progressive way of thinking. A lot of the times, and I don't think this is anybody's fault, but you have fire, you have police, you have EMS. Everybody does their own thing in their own section. They get really, really good at it. But, how does the actual working together come about, and how does it, play out? And I think that initial thought of how can we be better as a community, I think that really kind of laid a lot of the groundwork for what Matt and I were able to do, because we didn't do anything but take it to where we are in current day with the different options we have at our disposal. And we just kind of helped to update and revamp a few things, added a few things here and there, but the initial idea is the same.
Yeah, it's nice because you incorporate technology with it that it didn't exist back in 2014 when that was printed.
Yeah.
And it took those. It allowed us to identify some gaps that were in that existing plan. But I want to go back a little bit because I believe what led to that original kind of consortium locally there in Hancock County was a response to real world incidents. So, Lieutenant, I know you've studied actual active shooter events in the past. How has law enforcement response specifically changed? Yeah, the first one that I'm aware of was Columbine, right?
Yeah,
and Chief Cooper's mentioned a few, Uvalde and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Like, how has that law enforcement response changed?
Yeah, so I think when we think about active shooter, everybody automatically thinks of Columbine. It was one of those. It was extremely well publicized. It was on every media channel, and it was there for 4 weeks, if not longer. So initially, when that came out, the response to an event like that was one of, we have to ensure officer safety. We have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure our people from the law enforcement side are safe. So their response there was they did a surround. They basically called their specialized units who had the advanced training, the weapons and tactics, the SWAT that we're talking about, and they waited until they were safe enough to go in and take care of the threat within the school. And I think as time went on and we had the ability to look back on the way that unfolded, it was very quick and very obvious for us to realize that we were putting the wrong priorities at the top of the list. And I don't think anybody was doing it selfishly. I think it was just, that was the training. That was the way it was. So, initially it was, we wait for 2 or 4 people, you create a small group, you go through, and then you have a front and rear guard, and you have 2 side guards, and you're able to basically go through and be very safe for the officers as they're doing the clearing. Well, the more the studies came out and the more the shootings continued, we're seeing this huge delay. And, officers find out, they show up, and the delay from showing up and getting into the building was such that, there were a lot of casualties because of that. And the more that you get into it and the deeper you dive into it, you quickly find out that every 10 to 15 seconds is another life. So while it doesn't seem like a long time, that's eternity in a situation like this. So as we continue to work on it, we went from the quad, which was the 4-officer response. Then we started looking at other options and ultimately landed on the Raider, which is the response that we use, that we train. And essentially what my officers are trained to do is after they receive the call, they use the information that's provided to them, whether it's a gunshot or information from a student or a teacher or anything that could provide a direction on where to go. They make entry into the building, and then they start towards the direction of where they think the threat's coming from. So they take whatever stimulus. If there's a gunshot, they run to the gunshots until the gunshots stop, and then they start clearing, and then they move from there, and they, until they get to the point where they actually encounter the threat and they take care of it. So that's what we've been training on very heavily here very recently, and that was one of the things that led to the conversations with Matt and I. What can we do, and what are the different things that we can do? And we trained, and we take a couple days in the summer when everybody's out, and we put our officers through scenario-based training. We have actors, we have all kinds of stuff. We make it as real as possible. The actors shoot back at us, so we have that realism up. But we got to a point where we were still experiencing, and we were going through that. We were going to have minutes that we were still going to try to take care of. So the conversation was, we've done really well with the training. What can we do to take the training and get our people in there quicker? And I think that was one of the things that Matt and I really focused on when we started making that transition to how can we further help the schools with this response.
What does radar stand for?
So it's Raider, and it is, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I should have written it down, but I didn't. And right off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I could look it up, but
It's basically the individual
it's
cop
the
response.
Okay.
It's an acronym.
It's an
everything
for,
else.
but
Yeah.
I guess it's so the single cop doesn't matter.
Yep.
If they were an SRO or one of these individuals in the school, they're to go directly to the threat. That's what that training pertains to.
It's almost, and I wrote this down as Lieutenant Welch was talking about. It's empowering those individual officers to make that decision and not waiting.
Which is
that's what. we've all learned is the longer you wait, the more bodies are on the floor.
Well, it's kind of one of those things in our training, the training before is like by the time fire shows up or EMS providers show up, we can't just be waiting. We're going to be getting the mutual aid cops probably that we're going to be going in with, which is why it's important that you do the training with everybody because most likely the initial like Findlay or Oregon or, your local police department, those officers are in there, at the threat right away.
And I think I'm sure we're going to talk about it or lead into some, highlights of what we did, but we recognize that too. And we can talk about those gaps that we had with, exactly what you're talking about and some other things. And I think to relate what he's talking about with a single officer response rather than, let's sit back and treat it like a hostage situation and let's get our SWAT team up here that have the tactics. And, I look at it as what we're trying to do with the fire service right now and prioritizing search.
Yeah, that's right.
It's you identify that, hey, this isn't real effective in what we're here for, which is, to save as many lives as possible. And so in the fire service, we're prioritizing search and the police departments and law enforcement, they're single officer response to the chaos. So, but I'm sure we'll talk about some of those approaches and some of the things we changed, but those, what we've done is very effective.
And Stop the Bleed kind of came from Columbine too, of just everybody being outside. How many lives actually, were lost because they just bled to death out there or bled to death in there.
And we provide that type of training not only to our staff, but also to, how we respond. We integrated a lot of that stuff in, including the investment we made in the building itself. So, when we get a little deeper into the topic, we'll talk about that stuff too, because honestly, I don't know. I'm sure there's something we missed along the way, but I can't think of anything. I feel like we thoroughly went through this for, 6 months probably. And we can even get into the mind of a person that wants to do harm like this and some of the things that we integrated to try to disrupt that. But it's what we have in place is a fairly solid system. And I think the collaboration is really where it starts.
Well, one of the main problems that I think is obvious is the delay in notification of law enforcement officers and specifically in first responders in general. So the system that Findlay City Schools purchased was called Safe Defend. That includes immediate notification. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about that a little bit. But I remember in one of the training, and I'm not sure if it was in during Safe Defend implementation or if it was one of the police department's trainings, but they were talking about. I think they even played a 911 call from inside a school where a kid was sitting there and
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas.
Yeah, and there's no way you can expect anybody in a situation like that to call 911 and give accurate information. And then there's always a delay. Dispatch is trying to process that information, enter the call information, dispatch the right thing. So talk about that, Lieutenant, talk about that delay in notification and how Safe Defend works to kind of overcome that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing you got to understand is when you think about an incident like this, it starts before we actually arrive. So in order for us to even receive a dispatch, we have to get a phone call or some sort of alert from somebody on the premise saying that there's an incident going on. So if we really break that down and we think about what that looks like, you have a chaotic scene within a school where you have teachers who are not wired like fire and police. They do not deal with the chaos we deal with and the hatred and everything else that we deal with on a daily basis. And now they're trying to collect themselves enough that they're able to contact the police department. And even remembering how to call 911 in a situation like that is something that nobody thinks about because it's not just as easy as it seems. In that moment, you're just trying to hold yourself together. So they have to remember to call. They have to get the call through to dispatch. Dispatch then has to answer the call. You can only imagine how the caller is probably in hysterics, probably, struggling with words, maybe whispering. So now that dispatcher has to go through the process of how do I get the needed information from them? And very, very quickly we realized that a lot of these teachers and a lot of the people within the building, they don't necessarily know where they're at. And when I say that, I mean, we look for room numbers.
Yeah.
Because we don't have the luxury of spending the time in the building. So I don't know where Mrs. Smith's class is. I don't necessarily know where Mr. Howard is. And so if I get a call from one of them and they say the shooter's in Mr. Warren's class, that does nothing for me. And then we have dispatch try to clarify that information, and maybe they've changed rooms 3 or 4 times. Maybe they're in a different hallway. They weren't aware of the room numbers. So there again, you've got to get that information. And meanwhile, that clock is ticking. We're just adding those valuable seconds. And if we remember, every 10 seconds is potentially a life. So we're up to 2 minutes. We're up to 3 minutes. Dispatch finally gets what they think is enough to get the officer started there, sends that dispatch out. Officer receives it, and then finally starts there. So once they finally get boots on the ground at the school, we could be as deep as 4 or 5 minutes. And that may be a great response just based on what it is behind.
Of when your notification.
All that stuff that starts early, though, is not recognized. It's not something that's often thought about because there's such a human element to something like this that how do you sift through that chaos?
So the room number, they may not, it's kind of like, hey, I put my dad's cell phone number in my phone and I don't really know his number because
why would you memorize
Why
it?
would I memorize it? So they don't, so that a lot of times that's what you're saying through the schools is they may not know what room number they actually are assigned to.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that when Matt and I sat down, how can we make our response better? And very quickly, the easiest look at us was, let's number things. Yeah. Let's number doors. Let's number windows. Let's number it all.
I couldn't believe that. I learned that through this whole process, too. They're like, the teachers know the rooms by who teaches in them, and who runs that room. Which makes sense. It does. But for us, I'm looking at, like, I want room number 10, and they're like, oh, no, just like Lieutenant talked about. Look, I don't know what number that is. So that was actually part of the project was, getting labeling the rooms with specific numbers, labeling the doors.
And labeling the rooms on the inside of the room too, as well as the outside.
Absolutely. Yeah. So interestingly enough, we had this conversation probably 5 or 6 years before we even started this, and we'd done the trainings in the schools. And after every training, we do a debrief. What can we improve upon? What takeaways do we have to make our training a little bit better? And every time it was the same thing. Officers are like, we don't know where we're going. We cannot see the room numbers until we're right in front of them because they were above the doors, but those doors are set back. So you got to be standing right in front of them to be able to see where you're at. So this information was sent to the school probably 3 or 4 years in a row. And every year we'd go back, there was never any follow-up. And I'll take some responsibility for that because I probably should have been following up a little bit better. But we'd go and it's still nothing. And finally we got to the point where I was getting frustrated. I said, we've asked this several times. Why isn't it happening? And I was able to talk to somebody, and the response to me was, well, the administration says it doesn't benefit them. Luckily, I was able to get with Matt, and I said, we need to talk. We need to get in there. We need to sit down with somebody because they didn't see the benefit because they were looking at it through an educator's lens. It wasn't for the educator. Mm-hmm. And they were worried about the aesthetics because there is an appealingness that comes to you want to make sure you have clean hallways. You want to have different things. But the practicality for it, for a responding unit in an emergency mode that has to do as much as he has to in a little amount of time with as little thinking as possible, it just so outweighed everything as far as it needs to look pretty for us to say this needs to happen. And when I finally got into that room and we had that sit down with the guy in charge of the building, I explained it to him in that sense, and he understood. But because we had never had that conversation, we didn't have the right people in the rooms. We almost had, I want to say that there's probably a little bit of, well, I don't need to do that because
there's no regulation that tells me I have to.
Exactly.
And that's the problem of a lot of times. No, I think about the hospital. When I go and look for a room number in the hospital, usually it's like, if I'm going to 315, I usually know I'm going on the 3rd floor, but then I never know how to get to 15. Yeah. Did they do things in the hallway so they could shove us which way you got to go? So
it looks just like a hotel. When you come into those rooms now, you've got 304 through 309
I love
that way.
That's a great idea.
As bad as this sounds, we're dumbing it way down.
Yeah.
We're trying to make it so that all you have to do is pick up clues as you go in. Pick it up, boom, move. Because you've got so much to focus on. My officers, that is going to be the worst day of work for them probably ever. if they have to respond to something like that, the last thing I need is them to be overly focused on something that we can help them with.
Yeah,
right
sure.
now. So yeah, we've gone through all that, and it's a pretty extensive process. And if you want, we can get into it, or if that's coming up, we can definitely break it down.
I mean, I would like to add to that because I think it also affects how fire responds a little bit. But even from the standpoint of like, to describe this, every room number is visible from the exterior. Every door is numbered and visible. Every room number is visible from anywhere in any hall. Like if you're looking down a hallway, we have room numbers that protrude out in a sign for a single officer response. And then the directional room numbers in hallways of like, hey, room X is this way, room Y is this way, to give them the best direction. And the best part about it was, even though they, the school districts weren't really looking at it from a response lens, when we started to roll this out, we had parents come to us and say, this is awesome.
I'm sure.
It's so simple.
And it wasn't even because of what we were doing on the safety side of it.
Parent-teacher conference.
It was parent or a new student that moved to a new building. Like now it's easier for me to get to class because I have an idea where I'm going. But honestly, investment-wise, even with 13 buildings, it was the least expensive. I mean, we're talking about window decals, and police and fire identified like where walls are and how the numbering works with where walls are. And it's so simple. And we had a couple state representatives come kind of take a look at what we were doing, and it would translate even into, the private sector, and which would help police and fire on a response like that.
100%.
But it's interesting when you walk through a school building and you say, hey, where's, you can get the 1, 2, or 3, but then you start getting into where's, 315. And they're like, I don't know whose room that is. And then they start to look at the fire map, which then shows them how to get out of the building, but it really doesn't identify where 315 is. So doing that, which ties directly into what Chief Eberly, was talking about with Safe Defend, and why we chose Safe Defend, is it doesn't take a 911 phone call. It just takes a touch of a button by somebody that's programmed into the system, that's in the general location of where this chaos is happening, and it sends that out not only to people that are on duty but off duty. And it not only sends out the closest door to make entry and the exact room number where this is taking place.
So it's like a bank getting robbed and they press the panic button.
Except for it's not just going to be on duty personnel you
It's
get.
going to be everybody that is signed up on both police and fire departments.
Police, fire, we have rally points, and you can individualize it by school. So, for instance, Findlay High School has 3 different rally points than, let's say, our middle schools. So even our rally points get notified the same way, so they know in a matter of moments we could have a bunch of kids coming here because they're initiating run, hide, fight. Mm-hmm. And we, through pre-planning, which I'm sure we'll talk about too, with the program we use for that, but we have law enforcement protecting those places. So we have instant response to all of our rally points, to our reunification, and then law enforcement response to the buildings, and then also to staging. And it's all just a touch of a button, and we kind of relate it to a fire alarm. And there's different products out there, and we're not trying to sell anybody any type of, particular product, except for the fact that we believe in having a hardwired system. And there's some systems out there that are Wi-Fi, and heck, I can go sit in a school building, I'm the school board president, and I can't get on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And sometimes it fails. So we wanted something very similar to like a fire alarm. We wanted to not have, false alarms like we do with fire alarms. So that was one of the beauties of the system that we chose, was the fact that only people programmed into the system can set it off. Kids can walk by it all day long, touch it. You can go into a school building right now and try to set it off. It's not going to do anything.
So it's in the hallway.
It's everywhere, man.
Yeah, okay.
It's in every classroom. It's in the hallways like a fire alarm. And part of that was Stop the Bleed, because it comes with a cabinet that we can put supplies in. So there's weapons for self-defense. I got sick and tired of hearing some of these past events, and then you hear how schools are preparing for an active threat of any kind. And we say active shooter, but it could be somebody with a knife, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So how do you protect your kids? And you talk to teachers and administrators are like, we just want to protect our kids. We want to be as safe as possible. And you would hear about, well, we have a bucket of rocks. And I'm like, if my kid's in that classroom, I want you to have a little bit, better protection. So we put some things that they're able to protect their threshold if they have to hide and prepare to fight. And then we put in every single classroom, stop the bleed, whether it's quick clot tourniquets, you name it, they have access to that. If something were to happen, they can utilize those things. And then even from a fire standpoint, and we talked about RTF and talking about integrating all these things, like we come into the building in an RTF situation, which we've been able to get more aggressive because of it. But we come in with a limited number of tourniquets. We carry a limited number of tourniquets on every one of them, but every one of our firefighters have access to all those boxes with a touch of a button, and they can open it and get as many tourniquets as they want if they're inside the building and they're protected by law enforcement. They can do treatment, trauma treatment in a combat situation like that. First thing you're going for is a tourniquet, typically, unless it's, in the abdomen or something like that. But we have quick clot, we have bandages, we have everything in there that allows our teachers to perform those duties and be pretty effective in protecting the threshold. And I'm not going to get into what we have in each individual box, but I will tell you that through research and through what we've looked into with school shooters, if they are going to try to breach a door or come through a threshold, the weapon always comes first. And I will tell you that in Findlay City Schools, you're not making it in.
Wow. So I want to talk about that a little bit because the technology is great. Immediate notification is awesome. The equipment that's in each of the boxes in each of the rooms is absolutely vital. But if you don't train, I want to talk about the training part and what that looked like for how many, almost 900, 864 school personnel. And we're talking about, we also trained all the firefighters, all the cops. They had to be very familiar with this system, and we all had to be registered in the system. So we're talking about well over 1,000 people that had to be biometrically registered in this system. So talk about the logistics of that, and specifically some of the training, if you can, that the teachers and custodial staff, other school staff went through.
And I'll let Lieutenant Welch talk about the training aspect because they designed the scenarios based around getting people comfortable with run, hide, fight, rather than, we're sitting here talking on a podcast and, I listened to Jocko on a podcast after Uvalde, and he's like, why are these people hunkering down in a building when the threat is in the building? And it's the FBI, best practice to implement run, hide, fight. So that's really what we focused on in the scenario-based training. And I'm not going to say there weren't any bumps in the road in trying to get everybody registered and making sure people were registered with the right buildings, because we didn't register all of our teachers for every building. Mm-hmm. If the music teacher was going to these 3 buildings, those were the buildings they were attached to. And with police and fire, police are registered on the alert, but fire is registered. Fire and EMS are registered to get into the boxes. So, there's a little bit of some differences there. And we have over 1,500 people in the system.
Yeah, that's insane.
So we even registered our substitutes because we wanted them to have the ability to notify, and we wanted them to have the ability to protect kids in their classroom, which is the most important thing. So it was a huge undertaking. It took a lot of planning, specifically by the police department, that really took a lot of time, and how we divided staff up. And to highlight the importance of this, we literally shut down school. Mm. We canceled school for the day so we could do this all day long with staff. Not only
just registering everybody and training and doing all that, or what?
Yeah, so we taught them. We had the scenario-based side, so we split them in 2, put them in buildings that they were familiar with. We had it at an elementary, a middle school, and primary, intermediate, and then a middle school. So they were familiar with the areas they were in. We broke them up into 2, which the school district took care of that for us. And then during the morning, they were registered. They were taught how to defend the threshold. They were taught how to use Stop the Bleed. And then they would swap, and then they would come do scenario-based training with simunitions to get them in the mindset with Safe Defend going off of how this is going to play out. And I'll let Lieutenant Welch talk about that training, because there's another aspect of Safe Defend that kind of goes to what the shooter's mindset is and how it alerts people in the building, because it's very important to the component of run, hide, fight.
Okay. Now, before we're have you talk about the training, Welch, but before that, real quick, just so I can clarify in my mind, because I have never heard of this.
Safe defend.
Safe defend. Yeah, I've never heard of this. It's the first time I've ever heard of it. So it's boxes in a room that hold whatever you want to put into it.
Yep.
And in order to access the box, you have to have a registered fingerprint.
Biometric. Yeah.
Okay, to be able to open up the box. And then there's button. And so is every box a button, or is there like separate little buttons in the hallways and stuff too, or is that a box too?
Yeah, no, it's like a fire alarm.
Okay.
Except for in the classrooms, it's a bigger fire alarm.
Okay.
So the bigger fire alarm is the same thing that's in the hallway, but it's all activated by a biometric touch. So the minute that it's activated, it goes off like a fire alarm. It announces some things over the intercom at the school, and and for ours, you can customize that. We customize ours to say that Safe Defend's been activated, law enforcement's been notified, initiate run, hide, fight, and it just keeps going off, and and it flashes lights, and for 2 minutes it shuts off, and that's to effectively manage a response and communication. So when law enforcement's coming into the building, they don't have to deal with that and like go reset it. It automatically shuts down. But the only way when you touch it and the notification goes out to all police, fire, rally points, hospital, city administration, everybody that's going to be involved in the street department, it only goes out once. So if other people can go touch their boxes and get ready, if they're going to, attempt to hide and then get prepared to fight, we tell them, if you're going to make a decision to hide, get your stuff out and get ready to fight.
Okay. And
get your kids where they need to be. They were all taught on that. But if they touch the box, it doesn't send an additional text. Like, it's just the initial one, so we're not overrun with, notifications. But to kind of, paint the picture for you, it's lights like that. It's an actual announcement. It's, I would think of it just like, pulling a pull station of a fire alarm.
Okay. And now, is there any certain locations did you guys just determine where you thought the best locations would be at, or?
We put the boxes anywhere that kids would congregate, classrooms, common areas, gymnasium, stuff like that. And then we put the smaller actuators, like if you're coming down a hall and you see a kid pull out a weapon and you're in the hall, you can touch it. It like once you put your finger on it, it's not even 1 second. And when we were testing the system, we had everybody in the conference room in the mayor's office, and we set it off, and everybody at the table, and I think that was the most impressive part for you, everybody at the table looked at their phones like, Findlay High School, room this, door this.
Was that the one that they set off in Georgia when we were having our meeting?
In Kansas City.
In Kansas City, I'm sorry. And everybody picked up their phone because as soon as we saw him touch it, it was right there.
Wow.
It was impressive. That was a very impressive feature.
So what is that scenario when we talked about the training aspect of it? Talk about the scenarios, because I remember, participating in that and being super impressed how serious the teachers like take this super serious. I mean, this is a responsibility that's placed upon them, but nobody's ever empowered them to do anything about it before. So now they feel that empowerment. And they were taking these scenarios seriously. So talk about some of those.
Yeah, so what we did was I kind of looked at it from similar to the way I would train law enforcement. What would I do for my officers to have them get the best out of it? A lot of the training that you see is a lot of it, PowerPoint or lecture. And that's all good, well and good, but it's never enough. It doesn't actually give you an opportunity to do anything that is going to allow you to see how you're going to react. So what we did is we focused on the 3 principles, the run, the hide, and the fight. It's that basic concept, and it just kind of goes to your human nature. Everybody is, when faced with an incident, fear, danger, something of that nature, they're going to respond with a fight, flight, or a freeze mentality. So what we wanted to do is we took a hallway, and we had 5 classrooms, and we took teachers and we divided them evenly into the classrooms. And the first thing we did is we told them a real basic, hey, you're going to be at school on a normal day, and this is we want you to react in a run situation. So what we did is we went through and we had an officer come through with an airsoft simunition gun and simulated the gunshots, which is something that nobody in that room had ever heard what a gunshot could potentially look like in a hallway. So that right there was something they were able to kind of put back into their memory bank in the event they hear something. Maybe that's what it is. So they heard that. So that was the first piece they took away. And then they actually had a threat come into the room. And not only are we making them think about it, we're making them physically react to what we want them to do. So the response was, they come in, you have to run, or you hear them coming down the hallway and it's far enough away, you can make an intelligent response and you can decide to run. So they heard it and they realized that's gunfire, let's get out of here. So we made everybody evacuate, go out, and once they got outside, we slowed them down and we said, now we're outside, you've got your students outside, where are your rally points? And we made them do that mental exercise. Where do we go from here? The first time, absolute dumpster fire. Yeah. It's one of those things that you want to see what it looks like cold. Go in and you say, hey, that's what it was, but this is what we want to see. And then we ran it again. And we did that for run, we did that for hide, and we did that for fight. Now, the fight one was probably something that my takeaway was, make sure that when you're doing fight, after you've already done the other two and they realize that they want this to be real, that you take their Yetis away and you take all their heavy objects, because when we got to the fight, these teachers are like, yeah, we're doing this for real. We actually had an officer walk in and boom, here comes a Yeti right past his face. So kudos to them.
Yeah, kudos to them.
That,
I mean,
that's
thought about
exactly
it.
what we were looking for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he almost died. But
I saw a teacher get hammered with a desk.
It was
wild.
wild.
One of the people in there, one of the teachers saw him come in, like immediately shoved this desk and it hits him right above the knee, and he almost went down. And these teachers were serious about this. They were like, all right, let's do this.
But during that training, though, I mean, it is actually pretty scary. I mean, they're probably scared too, because they don't do necessarily training like that. So you put them in that situation, they might be responding exactly pretty close to how they would.
The gunshots were effective.
Yeah, absolutely they were.
And we set off safe defend in different locations, so they would have to think about where this is in the building and can I leave? Or is it the right time for me to go ahead and, hide and prepare to fight? Because we did the first one, like the run scenario, we did it far enough away where they would have time to go.
Okay.
And we wanted them to think about,
to look at their phone, see where the location is, and now they got to kind of like, okay, because it's going to say room number at that point, right?
Yeah, like they have to, it's important, it's imperative to know what your building configuration is, where these things are at. And especially in high schools, I mean, Findlay High School is a large place, right? Like if something happens in the music wing, almost 90% of that school can evacuate. And we have less targets in the building, which, we focused really on 5 things in this. And part of Run, Hide, Fight was eliminating, possible targets.
Yeah, it was very effective. And it was one of those things that I know in our training in law enforcement, we always tell our FTO, our new officers through FTO, you need to envision and you need to put yourself into the scenario, even the difficult scenarios, which if you talk to a teacher and you explain to them and you give them a graphic scenario, hey, you just saw Johnny come in and he just shot Ellen or something like that, you'll actually see them think about that. And that's not something they would ever think about, but they have to think about, what would I do in that case? And it gave them an opportunity to put them in a very uncomfortable spot. But the first time you want to do something, you don't want to do it in real life. Yeah. You want to do it in a controlled setting, in a scenario training at best. And that really, really gave them that opportunity to do it. And I don't know if we got any negative feedback from it. Like he said, we did 864 staff. That is a large number. We're talking bus drivers. We're talking grounds crew. We're talking cooks.
Anybody.
If you were in that school, you were in that training.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. It was a little bit, I would have made it a little bit more real. I probably would have advocated for maybe a couple downed people in the hallways, because I think a lot of it was, once you come out of the classroom in the run scenario, what happens if there's somebody down outside? How are you going to react to that? Mm-hmm. We got a little bit of pushback from that, just because, like I said, administrators and school officials not wired like you and I. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit harder sell there. But aside from that, I think we had raving reviews from nearly everybody. I mean, it was probably the only time that a lot of those peoples have been through an actual scenario-based training.
Well, when you talk about the pushback and for the training, a lot of times, the last time I was involved in the training, they had to send out like a notice to all the students to say, pretty much they get the free day off if their parents didn't want them to come during this, the training where it's potentially going to be, too much for them or whatever.
So, well, that's actually a point of discussion that we had, right? Like, because there are some parents that want their kids to go through realistic scenarios like that so they know what to do. Others, that's not a universal thing, because others are like, I think that would be too traumatizing for my kid if we did those same scenarios. So Chief Cooper, you probably heard more of that than anybody else being on the board.
Yeah, it's a really difficult balance, right? Like, obviously being in this line of work, I mean, I would want my kids to be involved in this so they, the first time they experience or at least have some sort of training in what to do isn't like in a real life scenario. We had a kid during the swatting call that we had a student come to a board meeting and beg us to be a part of the training. And that was eye-opening for me. Now, a lot of people don't have, not everybody's going to feel that way, but I often wonder what it was like when they first started practicing tornado drills.
Yeah.
Was there pushback? Or what was it like when they used to, now we're required to have, fire drills once a month? What was it like when we started that? Was that too traumatic? Did it cause panic? Back when all of us went to school, we never worried about this.
Correct.
And now it is on the minds of students, whether we like it or not, whether you're a parent that knows it or not. I experienced it firsthand with my own daughter. And so, and getting them to open up and talk about it, they're watching this stuff on the media. They know when this stuff happens. They have access to social media. So if something does happen in a school, and that sticks with them. And so whether we want to be adults and, bury our heads in the sand is really a personal choice. But at the same time, like, you have to start somewhere. Yeah. And these are real events. Believe it or not, active threats and active shooters are killing more people than tornadoes and fires in schools.
Yeah.
And we don't practice it.
How did you guys manage the social media, cell phone, and everybody, like with the kids? How did you guys, what was your take on that when you did training and
Well, we only trained the staff first.
Okay.
Yeah, we did not I think that's the next step in this process is to start to integrate. Now, I think the training, the way we started to talk about how we will train is going to be different based on how the age of the kids, right? Like, we don't expect a kindergarten teacher to take an entire kindergarten class to a rally point if it doesn't make sense. And typically elementary schools are a lot smaller. So those might be immediate lockdown kind of procedures. And then if you get into, more middle school age where they can actually run and you can kind of organize that run with, some more mature students, that's going to look different than, let's say, the high school. Because we even talked about, like, during the swatting incident, we had kids evacuating that building. Some, in just a panic, went straight to their cars and left. Like, how do you account for that and how do you organize that? So, when we talk about real life training, I think we have to be realistic to the age of the children because you're not going to treat them all the same. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. And we're trying to wrap our heads around that now. Now we do rely on the expertise of the educators in that moment. Like, what can you effectively manage with your group of kids or with your group of students? Because that's going to probably develop our training moving forward on what they think they can do.
I think part of that, I talked a little bit ago about empowerment. Empowering each teacher is going to know what they can manage with their students, right? So just giving them the autonomy and the responsibility, authority, whatever, to say, all right, here, there's a threat. The best thing for my kids in this room is to take them and go there with them or lock them up in there. So I think it's going to depend on not only the age of the students, but
well, yeah, because like kindergarten classrooms have to have the door to the outside. Most of the new schools have 2 doors in the kindergarten classrooms too.
Yeah,
So
and that's a great
it does
opportunity
depend
to
on what year.
get everybody out of there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and even teaching teachers like the basics of conceal and cover. You
Right.
know, like it was easy to shut the door and make sure it's locked, but then what do you do? And you know, once they kind of got that like out of sight, out of mind, and we know that the only time that this is ever where a shooter's ever tried to actually go through a locked door was in Virginia Tech,
Yeah.
and they didn't make it.
Yeah.
So you know, like
They
that's
won't
your
do
first line of defense.
Yeah.
You know, they're there to kill as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time. Why? Because they don't want to encounter law enforcement.
Yep.
So any barricade you can put between you and them is probably going to protect you.
Do you guys have any of those barricades
Oh, yeah.
at the door, on the door too? So
Yep.
when they shut the door, they just throw the lever? Is it the one at the
We have
at
the boot.
ground? Okay.
Yep. Yep. So we have a process to that. They're to shut the door, boot, activate, get their stuff, get ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And that's that whole system is pretty impenetrable you're not going to force your way through that door. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you've got the boot in place, if you got it locked, you're not going to force your way through that door. Lieutenant, what about, so Chief Cooper alluded to it's a significant financial investment, right? At least the system that Findlay City Schools went with. Other school districts might not have the same resources or whatever. What are some of the things that they can do on a limited scale to kind of try to accomplish the same thing? Have you guys thought about that? Like,
I think the obvious answer is the numbering system.
Yeah.
It's very, very inexpensive when it comes right down to it. And that was easily, if we had to choose one thing to do, I would say that would probably be the choice.
No kidding.
Just because there's so much of a need for us to be able to navigate and get to the problem as quickly as possible. Obviously, the notification system's great. But, I mean, if we're talking dollars and cents here, that's a no-brainer.
I forgot to ask you, do you guys number it on the outside of the building
Number
too?
it on the outside. So we start with the first door and we go clockwise. And first door is 1. Everything around there that is a fobbed entrance that we can get into because our officers are keyed to the location, then that is a door that'll pop up on the notification. It'll tell us what door to go to.
Okay.
So that goes all the way around. And if you're standing and you're looking at the building and you look up on the second floor and you see 253 on the top left of a window, and then you see 2 more blank windows and then 254, that means 253 starts at the numbered window, goes over to 254, and all those windows are encompassed in the one room. So
Okay.
we're able to essentially do a mental picture of where we're at even before we make any type of entry into the building, which I think is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. And you're starting to see it more. You're seeing it in a lot of different locations, not just schools.
Yeah.
But you're seeing businesses do it. You're seeing churches do it. You're seeing any place where there's a large number or a potential, chance for a soft target. You're seeing a lot of these measures pop up. So I think that's the first thing. And then secondly, that doesn't cost any money at all, is getting whoever is in your jurisdiction for law enforcement, fire, EMS, and the administrators, get the right people into the rooms, sit down, and then just brainstorm. And everybody get on the same page. And be open to why something would work for somebody that maybe you don't see a need for it for you. So the biggest thing is if you are willing to have those conversations, check the egos at the door. There's no room for that in something like this because we're talking about kids' lives, right? So check the egos at the door, come in, everybody make their pitch, have an open discussion, and see where it goes from there. You'd be surprised at things that come up out of it.
I would just say I would do that before you number, because we
absolutely.
ran into, I mean, you have to have the responding entities understand what the numbering means, right?
Yeah, true.
And we went, I'm not going to name names, but we went to a school district and talked to some folks, and they looked down and had this box on the floor, and they said, hey, we saw Findlay was numbering, and we have these numbers, but we really don't know what we're supposed to do with them. And so, you have to have that conversation with the people that are, that need those numbers and need to understand where they're placed and what they mean. And then you can start, deploying the numbering system, which I agree with Lieutenant Welch. It's such a big impact for little to no cost. And just to go back to it is a significant investment for everything we did, but like Safe Defender, I think even comparable products that you'll look at, because there's a couple on the market. It's the cost of a phone per room, a cell
Really?
phone.
Yeah. If you think about it that way.
I mean, how
we're
many-
all walking around with $1,000 phone in our pocket, you know, as
How
much as
many-
we hate it, but
How many, other things have, I don't care if it's a business or government or school district or whatever, but how many things do you buy where you're like, oh yeah, it's the cost of a phone or,
yeah.
whatever. How much is it to protect, in our situation, 6,000 kids?
Wow.
Is it worth an iPhone? Because to me it is. And that's what it costs to put that system in place.
The numbering, but I picked up on what you said, that when you guys numbered them, you went by fobbed entrances. So that's how the doors went. So it was by where they could actually go. So it was one, and then it was clockwise. Because I think it is important, like if the responders don't know what door it is, I know in my previous locations, we've done like the numbering was even different than that. It wasn't by a fob location. It was just like I was telling Eberly about it, it's just like A1, A2, B1, B2, because firefighters know Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. So we knew that if they called out an A side, at least it would get us to that side. There is a little bit of issue with that, though, a little bit because of the cutouts, how the school is, and all the different angles that they go. So, it is all dependent on what each locality, comes up with as what's going to work best for them. But at least the bottom, I guess, the point of it is to make sure whatever system's deployed, that everybody, the responders and the people that are in the system, because this is not only deployable to just schools, but I would say factories and any other places for us that we're going to respond to, because the active shooter can just as well go to any of the, the local factory and do the exact same thing that they do in a school.
Yeah, and I think there are actually, I learned this from an actual event, but there are factories out there that have their internal systems in place where you maybe pick up a phone and hit this number so many times, and that's a threat, right? But we need to know how to get in there and where to go.
Yep.
And so I think it's important to have that collaboration. It costs nothing to have a conversation.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Like we have an internal plans review process for new buildings coming in town. Like that could be one of our things. Let's do a door numbering system just like we do with the schools, because we all the firefighters and all the cops know what that is.
Kind of like no different if you require a Knox box, or if you require the the downturn on the 5-inch, that sort of thing on
your
the
main
FDC.
entrance is number one, and it goes clockwise all the way around. Yeah.
Then that way it's standard all the time on any new builds. It's already done. It's kind of one of those things that's called out. That's
Or
pretty good idea.
however your community wants to do it.
Yeah, true.
Like
whatever they
that's
decide.
As long as you have the people at the table, which you mentioned a minute ago after the the numbering system, like get the people on the table and start having these conversations. I thought about that earlier when Chief Cooper was talking about the emergency plans that schools, or maybe you were, Clayton, about the emergency plans that schools have to put on file. It usually is like, hey, that's the school's plans. Here's the fire department's plans. Here's the police department's plans. And nobody looks at them. Right?
Well, and
there's no collaboration.
And honestly, in our roles, a lot of times we get the signing sheet.
Oh, yeah.
You get the signing sheet. I'm
is it
like,
done
well,
good
I would
enough?
like to see the plan before I sign it, because I have no idea. I'm new,
I mean, if we're being honest, how often are we just checking a box?
That's right.
Yeah.
We're checking a box because it's a requirement, but it's not actually something that we can act on, without
And it's
having
all by
that
regulation
conversation.
by the state that
Absolutely.
requires you to do this, and they're just required to do it. And then they get on this time crunch, and they're like, they're running around just, hey, I just need you to sign it. Well, we're like, is it really right? But
sign it and upload it to OD's website, and then you're good to go for the year. And it's never communicated down to the people that will be. And it's not the fault of anybody in particular.
No.
It's just the way it is. I
system.
think it's a requirement that was made, which I think in concept was probably great, but really the requirement should be everybody should sit in a room that would respond to an emergency at this building and have a conversation, because we ran into so many things, even with communications. We found out State Highway Patrol doesn't have access to the radio channel that we were identifying as being inside the building. This is the radio channel that you're going to operate on inside the building. And we had to get permission for them to have that channel. And so we had to, send the MOU down to the state to have them approve it. So even the State Highway Patrol that was in these conversations knows the plan, are on the system, know what channel they need to go to. And even staging, one of the things we found, and I'm sure we'll talk about pre-planning for a minute, was a lot of these plans that we see have separate EMS staging, separate fire staging, separate law enforcement staging, and we changed all that to make it more effective for us and to give us an opportunity to be more aggressive. But all this starts from a simple conversation.
It does. And I would say that's one of the things we are pretty fortunate about here in Oregon is they do a quarterly safety meeting. And it's like all the, the principals and the superintendent and the police and the fire. And, and last month, we talked a lot about last quarter, we talked a lot about appliances in the classroom. And then just being able to, because there's the teachers and stuff want to just kind of build up a lot of those things, but it really starts with anything, just to have a simple conversation, build a relationship, and then it builds that respect to see where everybody else is coming from. Cause it's their job is to educate the students and your guys' job and our job is to, keep them safe or to take care of them. So
they expect us to show up and know what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But Safe Defend, I am kind of curious about how much are we talking though? Like, say significant investment, like how much is Safe Defend? And I get that it varies by the amount of buildings that you have or whatever, but I picked up on earlier, you had said a hardwire, install, which also kind of made me think about during plans review and, that sort of thing, because when you do BDAs and different radio stuff in there, if it has to run in that same conduit that's protected, in fires or whatever else, if that would be a thing, but just kind of curious on, cost, like what would that be?
Yeah. I mean, for our 13 buildings, I think it was about $980,000 is what we had total into, fully getting it going with the, the announcement, the lights and all the systems, the boxes. That includes all the stuff in the boxes that we put in there, which really is next to nothing. I mean, you break it down per classroom. And to me, and I think Lieutenant Welch would agree, and I would say even, Lieutenant Slates, because this makes more sense in a rural setting, really. You think about response time.
For sure.
You're going to want quicker notification in a rural setting than you would an urban one. So it's my personal belief, and I think we've made this pitch a couple times to, people that have the ability to make some changes. And there's two bills, I think, right now in the legislature to require immediate notification for active shooter stuff for school buildings. They don't require the system to be hardwired, but I would say that you're making a mistake if you don't require it to be hardwired.
I totally get that.
I mean, there's a reason why fire alarms are not Wi-Fi, right? And so I struggle with that because I feel like, and I know we got into this discussion before, we started on the podcast, but if you're going to do it, let's do it right. Mm-hmm. And so having a hardwired system to me is the most important. Otherwise, you're going to experience some failure. Now, whatever system you pick. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other, but it's literally when you break it down per classroom and how many notification systems we have in place in each school building, it was less than the cost of an iPhone per classroom. And we have teachers all the time that are like, can you please put a phone in my classroom? Like a regular phone that I can just pick up and call the office. A lot of school buildings have intercoms that they can call down to the office or whatever. And they're like, just put a phone in here. Even if it's, if I have to call a parent or something like that, or a parent needs to call me. And it's like, we're willing to invest in things like that, but not these things that could absolutely impact a police and fire, EMS response, hospital response to protect kids.
Do you ever think that like a Safe Defend would ever kind of be connected in the fire alarm system at some point, maybe down the road, where it's kind of like an all-in-one system that's when it's put in just no different than like a burglar alarm or whatever else?
I mean, I think it would be a great idea. Maybe you'd have to shoot that to them and talk to them about it. I believe, and I don't want to speak for them, but they had to have recognized, like, they didn't want alarm fatigue, which is something that we had talked about extensively. Like, we didn't want it to be, a kid could go pull it and create panic across the entire building. So I don't know how they would integrate that into a fire alarm unless they made it, somehow it was regulated differently to where you could biometrically set it off or something like that?
I think it would be more like on the planning side of things. If let's say you're building a new school, if you don't plan for something like this, I think you're crazy. For like,
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Like
yeah.
maybe like on the whole initial install, like on a new place.
yeah. Oh man, it would be, how much easier would that have been?
Yeah.
When Findlay was built in Glenwood or, Donnell or something like
Yeah.
that, where you're like, all right, hey, we're going to add on this much because we're adding the safe defense system.
Because do you think the main cost was a lot of the cost of labor because of hardwired and being able to run? And
we
all that stuff?
had to run some new drops, but we made the pitch to the Ohio Department of Public Safety, and then ultimately went to the School Safety Center, and we ended up doing a presentation at the Ohio School Safety Summit down in Columbus. And it's always been our mindset: if you're not going to mandate it now or regulate it now, which we regulate and mandate all kinds of stuff across the state.
Correct.
Every school district in this state gets money from the Ohio School Facilities Commission. Make it a requirement to a new building, at the very least. If you're going to build a new school building, you have to have this in place.
I was thinking about that when Welch was talking about the numbered system. Like, make that a requirement,
Yeah.
for schools that you have
Yeah.
this type of signage.
It would be better if it was there on a standardized, because I was just thinking about that as we talked about what works for us here might be something different for you guys in Findlay. However, if it could be the same for our neighbors, what could be different for us, where we're going to be responding to each other, where it'd be better to have kind of a standardized approach across, at least with all your mutual aid partners on what that numbering looks like.
And the last we had talked to them, they were considering making some of these things a requirement, but we haven't really seen anything, and every time I travel somewhere, I look at school buildings like, well, that's numbered, but I don't really know how it's numbered.
Yeah, correct. So the buy-in started with the conversation.
And it doesn't cost anything to get the right people and all egos aside, right? Like, you have to check your ego at the door and have a conversation. Sometimes we're fortunate in Findlay, and I'm so appreciative of the relationship that we have between police and fire, because it is a very, very tight relationship, and there's no egos there. If we're doing something wrong that they don't like, we have a conversation about it, and likewise. And if you can just get those two entities and other outside entities that would respond, sheriff's departments, state highway patrol and stuff like that, in a room, and just say, listen, we're here to solve a problem. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out how we're going to communicate. Let's figure out how we're going to deploy RTF, and let's figure out all these things right now. And then let's plan for this in all of the school buildings that we would respond to. And that's kind of where all this started, was a simple conversation between Welch and I, grew into, at one point in our training center, we had the hospital, state highway patrol, EMS, fire, police, sheriff's department, school officials, and we built a plan for one of our school buildings, and we said, this is how we're going to respond, and this is how we're going to build out our plans, and then we have a system that we're able to share that with everybody.
So whatever happened to the fog then? What happened to those books? Did you guys just mothball those?
We still got some.
What happens to those?
There are still some schools in the county that rely on that. The concepts are still good in the fog, because we essentially took the same concepts that were there, like predefined roles, worked out the communication plan, had rally points, reunification centers, that kind of thing. So those concepts are still valid, even though they might not be 100% accurate anymore.
Sure. So if I got the alert, say I got an alert, I'm close to the school, it's going to tell me what rally point I need to go to based on who I am, or what's going to...
No.
Okay.
We're in the process of integrating that, though.
Yeah, right now it's just built for the people that are going into the school to stop the threat.
So the police department.
And people in the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, right.
The notification.
But the notification is about where the threat is.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it tells you the room, the closest door, that kind of thing. We had what turned out to be a false alarm, but safe defend activation. And I was at the fire station at the time, and it was one of those things where everybody is kind of looking at their phones going, oh, we haven't got this before. Like, so people are looking at me going, is this a test? And I'm like, there's no test with this. Like, no, go.
Yeah. Okay.
And they had streets barricaded and everything. Cops were running in. It was an awesome. awesome,
But
really
what
fast
the
response.
but what the streets guys got was something different than what I would get as if I'm a police officer or a firefighter, or they don't.
They
Okay,
got
so
the
they just
same notification. What they got to do is then there is a corresponding digital fog, essentially, is what we've created that they can go to, and then it'll show what their responsibility is for like streets. It'll show you where they're shutting down. Same thing for OSP. Like they cover a lot of the outlying schools and the
Rally points.
rally points reunification. So they'd look at that digital and it'd be like, OSP, this is your responsibility, and they'd pre-deploy.
that's
out
what,
there.
okay. That's
Yeah,
it.
so-
Yeah,
But like Matt was saying, we're trying to work with the company that we're with to get it so that certain groups
Sure.
will get a link.
We've already built the links out. I could send you a link where if you get a notification, you can touch it and it's going to tell you where you need to go.
yeah.
I mean, we're very close to it's a character thing right now on the text. So once we can integrate the link into the text, we can separate the groups through a school system platform that almost all school districts have. It's called the Remind app. But we're able to flip out, what your part of the plan is based on that link. And we can build the links based on the digital plan that we create, which makes you don't have to print them, right? And so every time there's a change, the only people that are authorized to make that change are within emergency responders. And we use a program called Stratasite, and it has all of our school buildings in it. And that's where we pre-planned everything. You drop a pin on a place for like a rally point, and you can build your link around that, and you can shoot that out to all the teachers that are in the building. And it's the same thing with law enforcement. You can shoot out the entire plan, like where's the unified command post, where's staging, where's, the comms plan will be on there. This is what channel I need to go to. I'm going to 32 Fire Ops 1 if I'm going to staging. If I'm going in the building, I'm going to XE Hancock. I mean, it has everything laid out for you on your phone on your way.
Which is that I think is a huge part
It is.
of being able to just update that electronically at any time you make a change. Now we're just updating electronically, and then it's always going to be updated for any time it ever has to go out.
And we even have a command book in all of the police command, fire command, OSP has a command book that has everything in it from floor plans to pictures to a tactical worksheet, a dispatch, what comms everybody's going to be on, what comms command's going to operate on, and obviously a unified command situation, but every entity has a different responsibility and a different radio channel that they communicate on. And like for us, if you go to staging, you're on 32 Fire Ops 1, but the minute you leave to go to RTF, we know that if you're on the EMS side, you're going to Hanco 1, and if you're the police officers that are responding with RTF, you're going to XE Hancock, so you know what's going on in the building. And we have all that stuff drawn out from a conversation. And then we were able to build those plans in Stratasite and then deploy those. Our teachers have access to their plan, but they can only view rally points. They don't have access to see what we're doing.
I gotcha.
It's crazy how extensive this got, really, from just having those initial conversations.
Is Stratasite the pre-plan program that you guys use for your fire inspection stuff, pre-plan, or just a different?
No, and that's really when you were asking earlier about what happened to the fogs, we did transition into using Stratasite. It's essentially an electronic version of the fog that's a lot more, you can revise it a lot easier. Okay. You don't have to, you can print it. Like the command books that Chief Cooper was talking about was basically a printed version of all that stuff for each school. But that's what Findlay City Schools did, was they went with a safe defense system for the things that it does, built response plans within the Stratasite software and kind of merged those two. But so it's pretty extensive.
The schools bought the Stratasite platform, but only gave access to police and fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
To be able to build the plans and, just keep track of the plan. So like if the director of operations said, hey, we're going to do something different in this building, it was his responsibility to get a hold of somebody at police and fire
To make the change
in the plan. And then once the plan's changed, then everybody can go on and view the plan from their own computer, phone, whatever, and they can say, okay, yeah, the plan's changed. Now I know we have rally points that we know we have access to, and that will be in, I would say operations during school days, so they would get the notification and know nobody's to come in here but school and state highway patrol. And so they're all on the plan. They're all on the notification system. We had the swatting call we had at the high school. We had jury in shut down because it's one of our rally points, but a bunch of kids went to the jury and they would not let anybody in or out of that building. The staff at the jury, like they had bought into the plan.
That's awesome. So the schools paid for it all by themselves, or was it a group effort or grant or whatever?
So part of like me, I get a little emotional and upset about it when people, don't make the investment in safety when they say it's a priority. We made the investment and then we applied for a grant later. So I believe that the state of Ohio recognized that we were being proactive and fully funded our plan.
Nice. Wow. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah. All of our infrastructure and everything was completely paid for.
Wow.
Through a grant, but after the fact.
That was after.
But after the fact, yeah, you invested in it first. But that's still nice.
So, we got pretty deep in the weeds on the system and that kind of stuff. I want to talk about briefly.
Sorry for my ignorance.
No, it's cool. It's because, and I know these two could talk about the nuances of it all day. I want to talk about the emotional response that we saw from some of the teachers and some of the students after this whole thing kind of was done and we did the training and we got the system in place. So I know both of you guys had kind of personal experience with that. So whoever wants to tackle that, what were some of the specific responses that you got from people?
We sent out a survey basically after the training asking for feedback on what they would like to see different in future trainings and how comfortable they were with what we were doing and every part of the plan. And we didn't receive any negativity. In fact, it's reported on the news. You can Google Findlay Safe Defend and you can see some teacher interviews that took place. And there was a teacher that got emotional and was like, I'm so thankful.
Yeah, she was crying if I remember right.
She was crying because she had experienced some, hoax traumatic events, right? Mm-hmm. Like, possible active shooters in different buildings within the district. But I think a lot of these, I don't want to speak for anybody in particular, but a lot of things I was hearing from teachers and staff when I was on the school board or, traveling through buildings was, we really don't know what to do and we don't really have a plan. Again, plans were being developed, but not really communicated. And this stuff kept happening. And so the response we were getting was all positive to the point where we have an email that you can send to the district that is for the public, right? Mm-hmm. And our communications director at the time received an email from somebody that had no kids in the building and had no tie to the school whatsoever, but lived in the community and said, "Thank God you're doing something." Because I think a lot of people just assume that these things are being covered, and they are checking a box, but are they really taking the time to dig into what do we really need to do here, and what are the gaps? Where are we ineffective, and how can we turn that around? And a lot of school districts all the time, not to get off the survey results because we had no negative, but we had some that from teachers that said this was the best professional development we've ever had in our entire time. These were 25, 30-year teachers. But they learned how to protect themselves. And it was a big deal. So, and like I said, not to get off the topic of the surveys, but when I look back at the entire project, it was such a big undertaking. But I do believe in what we did. And I'm the swatting incident is a perfect example. You can look up media reports from that, and you can see Chief Matthias get interviewed, and even the guy that's asking the question, the newscaster, I forget who it was, Matt Demchek.
Matt Demchek, yeah.
From WFIN, he's on there and he's like, we've responded to these before to get comments, and we've never, ever seen anything like this.
Yeah.
And we had parents across the street screaming because they couldn't get to the school building because our street department did what they were supposed to do. How many school districts across the state of Ohio have their school or their street department integrated into their active shooter plan.
Yeah, they took a beating from some parents that day.
They did,
and I understand it, but they
designed.
held their ground, man. They're like, nobody's going.
That's
in.
awesome.
It was impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, they're working when school's in session. You know,
Yeah,
like they're out and about. So
And they'll probably beat fire and EMS there a lot of times too. Or close.
I had to convince. I was in my personal vehicle, and I had to convince the guy at the barricade that I was who I was. And I'm like,
It was probably the hula shirt and the tan.
that was not
probably
the case.
what it
No.
is.
Yeah, you're not really the fire.
But tank top and shorts. Yeah.
They're right out there. I mean, but yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. I never want to use it. And in my heart, I know it's a deterrent. You know, like we talk about, you know, these getting into the minds of these people. And we had a great resource with, you know, the FBI. Dr. Greg Vecchi was part of, you know, some of this planning, and he's part of Safe Defend, and he's a chief behavioral science unit of the FBI and hostage negotiator. And he's written, you know, 2 or 3 books about active shooters. But, you know, he's like, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen police and fire communicate, or state highway patrol, or all these people be involved in the process. And then we have, you know, a swatting incident that takes place where it is activated like it's supposed to be. And we just turned chaos. Now, did we find additional gaps? We did, but we fixed them. And that's why we train. You know, we train as police and fire all the time.
Yep.
And so we saw this response where we had parents on the news saying, we are so thankful that the school district has this. We saw teachers after the training say, thank you so much for doing something, for giving us some tools to be successful. And then people from the public that, you know, after the training that sent in emails that were thankful that we were doing something, all for the main goal of what we're here for, protect our students and our staff.
Yep. Well, a couple other questions. What is the plan to maintain all the stuff in the boxes, unless it's maybe not? I know some of the stuff is, you know, disposable. That'll have to be maintained. So, but I don't know all the things that you have in it. So what's the plan to maintain that? And then if you would you share for the audience members on the grant that you guys got after the fact, what that grant might be or what it is, so they could potentially look at it if they wanted to as well?
Well, I feel like Welch on the Raider acronym here, but I would have to talk to the treasurer on which one. I think it's the Ohio School Safety Grant is what we got the grant for the system. And at that particular time, they were rolling out. There's a couple, because I think some came through the Ohio School Safety Center, and then there were other grants that were coming through the Attorney General's office. And I'm almost positive it was called the Ohio School Safety Grant that we got reimbursed for implementing the system. But I would have to check for her from her to be sure.
Yeah.
So, and then what was your other question?
The maintaining the
maintenance,
supplies.
Yeah. So every year we have keyed access. So you don't have to like biometrically set the system off, but you can get in and you can check expiration dates. And that's handled by the school district. Okay. Safe Defend will do it for the contract that you have with them. They'll maintain it and replace the stuff. And then we also follow up and make sure that our facilities people check them all in the summertime. So every year everything is looked at. And the only people that have keys to those are the people that are in facilities anyways. So it's not like a teacher can get in there and, you know, take a tourniquet and use it for classroom purposes. The only way they're getting in that box is if they activate it.
Okay.
And if they activate it, they're getting a huge response that they don't want.
Yeah.
But it's also, you know, some neat things about that too is we have the ability to test the system without notifying people too. We can take it offline like a fire alarm.
Okay.
And we can set it off and let kids hear it, let staff hear it, and, you know, nobody gets a text or notification, no 911 calls placed, because that's secondary. We did have some redundancy built in where a 911 call is placed that gives the exact information to the dispatcher, but it's not made from somebody in the building. It's made from somebody at a call center.
Wow.
So what kind of response? You guys have both been involved. Other school districts have reached out to you guys to say, hey, come and take a look. Has that just been that's been local here around the state of Ohio, or I guess if other school districts want to get a hold of you guys and get some input on something, how do they do that? How's the best way to go about it?
I think the easiest way to do it would just be probably phone call or email to Matt or myself, and I think we'd probably like to sit down, talk to them, just do like a best practices, what we've done, just kind of share what we've learned, because in everything that we do, we don't want to have to recreate something if you can kind of take it and borrow it from somebody else to fit your needs. And the number one objective is to let's make sure the kids are as safe as possible. So if anybody wants to reach out to myself or to Chief Cooper, I mean, that's something I know that I'm more than willing and he's more than willing to have those conversations. So,
and even
it's an easy one.
Reach out to the fire department, police department in general.
Yeah.
I know that the the city has been very supportive in what we've done, and I'm sure we'd be able to get whoever would be interested relayed to the right people. Whether it's you, whether it's the safety director, mayor, or even the police chief. I mean, somehow we'll get the information to who needs it. We just went and did a presentation at another school district up this way, and we tell people all the time, you don't have to do all what we did. We're giving you what we did and here's why, but we want you to protect kids. And we've had the school district reach back out like right away and was like, hey, we really like this, and this, and we're going to get some costs on that. Who'd you use?
Nice. So
we're willing to do the presentations and have conversations with anybody that wants to understand, the why behind what we did and how it's effective for us.
I know we've got some upcoming training in July for law enforcement, fire, EMS, on Raider stuff, on RTF stuff. And we're taking the steps to make that as realistic as possible too. So that's part of the ongoing part. Not only maintenance long term of the system, but maintenance long term of our skills as well takes constant.
And I think like
attention.
Something that Matt had mentioned earlier was we want to incorporate some of the training for the kids. I know that in 2018, right before COVID, the police department went on this large information education of Alice to all the students. And right before COVID, we had just completed, I believe it was 2018, because I was in a specialized unit at the time, and I did like 60 plus presentations. We had every student in the high school at Findlay High trained in Alice procedures.
Wow, that's cool.
Then COVID happened,
of course,
and that all kind of went by the wayside. But I think that is the logical next step. And how do we continue to progress with what we've already done, and how do we continue to prepare people? Because this is not only for something while they're in school. You have this as a life skill that you can take to college, that you can take to a workplace. Those little things that you learn in the run, hide, fight side of things, and how to protect yourself and what to do, going to go a long way. So,
and I think it's so important. Like my niece went to Michigan State when that happened, and it was like 11:30 at night, and she's texting me like where she's at, and she was at her sorority house, and she's like asking me like, Uncle Matt, what do I do? What do I do?
Jeez.
And I'm communicating with her like, this is what you need to do. Stay calm. Who's in there with you? Make sure you barricade and do all this stuff. And, it freaks you out even as an uncle. Mm-hmm. And, even after the fact, when you watch the path of this shooter from Michigan State, they walked right by her sorority house.
No way.
And they have him on video from her sorority house because they had outside cameras. And so even when I'm thinking about it for my niece, who now goes to the University of Kentucky for graduate school, I'm constantly thinking about like making sure they're good and understanding. And I have these conversations with my kids, and nobody wants a tornado to hit a building, but we practice it. We have to get over being worried about. We have to. We just have to prepare for it, and I think that's. And I want to hit on my daughter because I think this is important, and she'd probably hate me for saying this, but she used to watch me watch these events, like trying to learn from them, and I would research them and just being on the school board. And she got to that point where she was like, you need to shut this off. Like, just, I can't watch this anymore. And she was younger, But she got to the point where, like, even before I was watching it, she would text her mom and I and be like, I can't be here at school anymore. I'm worried something's going to happen. Just because she knew it was happening and how fast she can get information with social media now. And once we implemented what we implemented in Findlay, she completely changed.
Really?
She felt safer. Mm-hmm. She came out of her shell. She became the kid that I knew she could be, just because she knew that there were protections in place to protect her from this event and that people knew what to do.
Wow.
And it's a big deal for me because, you know, I don't think my oldest daughter would be where she's at today and knowing what her future looks like if we didn't protect her the way we should have been protecting her the entire time.
Yeah, that's strange. That's odd, you know, that has an effect on somebody's entire outlook, I guess, personality.
Well, anymore, it's
whatever.
such an impact on a lot of them too, because the anxiety and just, you know, just ramps up, and that's all they can think about, you know, and especially it's happening. And like you said, social media is right there at their fingertips. So they're seeing all these bad things happen, whether you want them to or not. It's all over the news. But the safety of it is that they feel when they're at school, because of all these things in place, that they do feel safe. And that was what was crippling, is that they just didn't feel safe. And you think about anytime your kids went and spent the night at a house or something and they called you at 3 o'clock in the morning and they just, something was off. They didn't feel safe, and that's why they, you know, couldn't stay or whatever.
Yeah, and it's really something too, you know, when you have your daughter come home and she's like, or she's texting you because, you know, you can have communications with your parents or family members, you know. But when your daughter sends you a text and says, why is there a cop running down the hall with a gun before we had anything in place? Right. And it can happen anywhere. Like they may get a swatting call, or somebody may call and say, you know, there's a threat in the building. But now we have this system in place where if you're not really getting notified, you know, you're still going to respond, but are you going to respond a little differently?
Yeah, there's probably nothing going on.
Yeah, if
Because
nobody's
somebody's
setting
gonna know
off something,
inside is cool.
Yeah, and so, you know, but that was traumatizing to her. That's what kind of kicked this off, was like, you know, there's somebody running down the hallway in a full sprint with a long gun looking for somebody, you know, and immediately, you know, the teachers would drop the boot and, you know, didn't really know how to react to this situation. But how many kids experience that and don't say anything to their parents?
Yeah.
Or even have this feeling like, you know, I don't feel 100% safe because I keep seeing this on social media, and it keeps happening, right? Like Georgia had their incident and it just keeps going. And honestly, you're not going to stop it. It's like a tornado. You're not going to stand in front of it and, you know, stop it from hitting your building. But we can argue gun safety, mental health. I'm not trying to get into any kind of political discussion. What I am saying is that it's our job to protect lives.
Yeah.
And
Predictable is preventable, right?
Yeah.
And so like if we can predict it, not necessarily in this complete case prevent it, but what we can do is to train and prepare for it to actually happen. We can't be just saying it's never going to happen, because, you know,
you're burying your head in the sand.
That's right. Yeah, that's completely right.
And I would not be the one that would want to stand in front of a press conference and say we did everything we could, when deep down inside, that's just not the case. And Findlay, I feel very confident about it. Now, can we save every single life? I can't guarantee that. What I can guarantee is you're going to get a very fast, effective response that will save lives.
Yeah.
And it's tough in the fire service in general. Like when you just said that about, like, you know, don't want to stand in front of a press conference and be able to say, like, you know, we weren't trained or we didn't prepare or whatever else for it. In the fire service, I'm sure in the police service as well, you know, there's just so many things, you know. You know, shipboard firefighting for us, you know, here in Oregon is one of the things that you don't necessarily have a lot of shipboard fires, but it's something that you got to be able to have. It's a completely different beast. And so, you know, trying to balance all that for firefighters and for training and to do it all is also a challenge, I think, just in the fire service as a whole, that we're trying to attack.
Yeah, jack of all trades. I mean, we're expected to solve people's biggest problems in that moment.
In that moment.
And then I'm talking about even from a law enforcement standpoint, you know, like they do so many things that the public doesn't really know about that they should be appreciated a lot more than what they really are. And, man, I love my job and I would never want to do theirs.
Yeah.
Same way.
Well, this is, you know, pretty heavy topic to talk about, but I appreciate both your time, you know, coming in and talking about it. Hopefully some of the listeners, if they don't have things in place in their local school district, maybe this will start it, you know. So you never know what the impact of discussion like this can have. So appreciate you guys coming in. I know I learned one thing, Lieutenant. You know what it was during all this?
I can imagine it's going to be something I said.
No, not at all. I learned that law enforcement is not good at staging. like fire departments, staging is a thing. That's one of our things that we do. Cops, we're like, whoa, staging is right here, and they're like flying past you 90 miles.
So I can explain that to you.
I'm like,
so
no, it's back here.
The staging is much like relaxation in the Lazy Boys. So we understand while we're out there doing the 100-mile-an-hour stuff, how the staging gets past us.
Yeah.
So.
I love it. They're
Just
not
keep blocking
good.
the street for the 5-inch.
I remember
brother.
talking to a police chief years ago, and I said, we've got to do better at this staging thing. We've got to get together on this because we're putting together these RTFs. And he's like, you think you're going to get cops to stage? And I'm like, is that not a thing? And he's like, it's not a thing for us.
Well,
like,
we do.
Well,
we do have a process in place.
We
though.
do. We worked through that.
Yes,
right?
we did.
We worked through it, and we came up with a system that takes into account all the needs. So it's,
by golly, we're trying.
We're trying anyway.
It's really a great thing, though. I mean, we've been able to work through those things. Those are some of the things that they don't think about that we do, and likewise, we don't think about some of the things, you know.
Yeah.
And they're just like he said, in an educator's lens or a police officer's lens, but even getting means a lot to me when you have even like the hospital get notified goes immediately into trauma alert.
Yeah.
You know, or we spin up 2 helicopters with a notification, and having all those people buy into the plan, and people ask me all the time, like, are you really that confident? I'm like, I'm very confident in what we have coming to the fight, and I'm very confident in what that response time is going to be. And one thing I'll add is, like, I hear this a lot from school districts, and I feel like it should be a topic we talk about now, but a lot of people will apply for grants, and they'll say, and I'll say, hey, what are you getting the grant for? And they'll be like, we're going to harden up this entrance, and we're going to make it harder to get into our building and put this bulletproof film on the windows. And it's like, do you realize that 97% of the time, the people that do these things already know how to get into your building, regardless of whether you have these safeguards in place?
Yeah.
And so we really focused on limiting access, but not investing in access and investing in the areas that we needed it.
Has there been any consideration on, staff changes at the schools or the hospital? You just made me think about it with this thought, but that's in place to maybe bring them on when new staff? Do you do an
We
annual?
onboard it.
You onboard it with the all? Okay.
Yep. And then as specifically for schools, right? Because there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And so we have people responsible that take them out of the system, and then when they get hired, when we hire new staff, they are onboarded and they get a variation of this training, not as extensive as scenario-based. We would like to get there. I think that's coming, but they do understand the plans, the system. They get some self-defense training, and then they also get loaded into the system biometrically.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of our onboarding process.
We do the same thing with new cops and firefighters too.
That's just part of their orientation when they get hired and whatnot.
Yeah,
Okay.
one of these two takes them down to the school administration building, gets them entered into the system.
Well, this has been great. I think that honestly, just sitting here talking to both of you, I think that really the success of it all is because of your guys' working relationship. For one, your personalities of being able to talk to, create relationships and be able to just, pretty much it's about selling your guys' self though too, because if somebody on the other side, and you could probably speak to this being on the board member, but somebody on the other side, you know, if you can't trust the person that's delivering the message that there's going to be follow through that's going to happen, and that there's going to be a lot of work, that somebody's got to take the lead, and you guys as a group together have done a phenomenal job. I can tell you have a great working relationship, so I think that lies on your guys' shoulders a lot. So that's pretty awesome, and you know, congratulations on that.
We did ride here together.
Yes.
You did?
Yeah.
You both drove?
Yeah.
One did the pedals, one did the steering?
Yeah. They work together on it. No, it's awesome. I'm glad. And I asked these guys to come up because I'm proud of what Findlay City Schools has been able to do, and specifically these two guys leading the way. And hopefully it improves, you know, somebody that needs help in some other part of the state. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think for me, like, I really just, it's about the kids, and it's about families, and it's about parents that are like me that have kids in the building. And I hope that the legislature comes to their senses, and if you're going to make something a priority, and you want school safety to be kind of at the forefront, then you need to look at systems and requiring it, whether it's for new buildings or whatever. Like, we don't have the platform to make that change. We can only help individual school districts make it, but there are people with a lot more power that have the ability to make this thing a reality for every school. And I'm hopeful that one day they work to prevent and to prepare for things like this, because we already do it for two events that rarely happen.
yeah.
Lieutenant, any other takeaways you have as we close out here?
No, I just really appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk about this stuff. It's something that is very close to us, and we do feel like it's something we've put a ton of work into, and we're very proud of what we've done, and continue to try to build it and make it better. And there isn't a training that goes by that we don't find something that we can fix or critique or continue to build on. So always open to talk to anybody else that wants to figure out what a map to this might look like for them. Just maybe a sounding board. Anytime that there's any type of a question, I think it's pretty obvious that we're both open to any type of conversation.
Well, it's great to know, and I'll tag your guys' emails if you're okay with that in the notes of this podcast. So if anybody's interested, you can just check out the notes and be able to access their email and get a hold of them as far as the contact information goes. But so thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you for tuning in to the Triple P Podcast, Premier, Professional, and Proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you feel so inclined, please help us spread the word by telling your fire and EMS friends about this channel.